All right, welcome to the Krug Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. It's Thursday night. Normally Dieter's spot, but Jake Hutchinson is filling in for a sick, beat-up, injured Dieter Kurtenbach. It's the Krug Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. Let's go. Yeah. All right, we get it rolling on a Thursday night. The Pig and a Pickle Krug Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get some brisket chili. Tell them the Krug sent you. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, on the Monterey Peninsula. Thanks to Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. And we are also, this live stream is sponsored by betr, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use betr to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners, and you'll get your first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does this is automatically entered into a drawing to win this, a free autographed red Fred Warner Niner jersey. We'll announce the winner at the end of November, but everybody who signs up is automatically in a drawing to win the signed Fred Warner jersey, which I have right here next to me. So there you go. Thanks to betr for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. We welcome in Jake Hutchinson. Jake, good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's I honestly like that the fall's coming back. You know, get a little rain, feels nice for a sec.
Yeah.
You know, I had to take my dog to the vet today because he decided to fight a squirrel. He won, but also lost a little. So
Scratched
he's
up?
fine. He's fine. He's scratched up a little bit, but he's fine. He tries to fight every rodent he sees, and you know, it goes how it goes.
What kind of dog again?
Australian Shepherd. So, you know, his like life's calling is herding and trying to chase literally any animal he can find.
Well, we get it rolling tonight, and it's good to see you. And why don't you do a show with Dieter, and why don't you promote that? Tell people if they've never the Hutch, if they've never experienced the Hutch Diesel, where exactly they can go find you.
Yeah, we're on YouTube, Dieter and Hutch. Some of it is screaming into the void about the things about the Niners that drive us insane. But we try and get into the nitty gritty of it. You know, offensive line protections that are a nightmare. We highlighted Sam Okuwanu early in the season. Some of the guys that are either not getting enough love, things that I think should be highlighted more, and just what's really going on as we see it with the Niners offense, defense, and everything in between.
Well, the late breaking news of the day is that according to Nick Wagner, and I'm not sure if he put it out on Twitter or not, but Nick Wagner is reporting that Jennings was limited today in practice with an ankle sprain, kind of a late breaking revelation there, which is big because there's already not going to be any, there's not going to be any Ayuk the rest of the year. And the last two games when there hasn't been Debo or Ayuk, JJ has gotten a 36% target share. And in those games, he's top 6 in yards per target. He's top 6 in yards per route run. So they were banking on JJ to be a major player, I would think, going forward, and especially this week. No Ayuk, and now JJ's got the ankle, and we don't know his status for Sunday. How serious, how big of an issue is this for the 49ers if Jennings can't go on Sunday?
I think it's pretty massive. I mean, he's become the crux of their offense. You know, he used to just be their third down guy, and now he's their X wide receiver. I think they're mixing Pearsall in there a little bit, but if it's just Pearsall and Debo and, Ronnie Bell was like leaned on a little bit, he's still somehow in the mix. That's not ideal, especially with, Nick Bosa probably not going to practice this week and the Seahawks getting DK and probably right tackle Abe Lucas back. That's not what you want to hear. I think Jennings has taken a leap this year. He's never been a guy that's been like a monumental separator, but he wins just enough in man coverage, and he's such a strong, physical, crafty wide receiver that even when he doesn't get a lot of separation, he's just always making catches. and he's crucial in the run game. Like, they lean on him like a second tight end, and the fact that he can run whatever they want to run and he knows his assignment and Shanahan can lean on him, that's a massive amount of just knowledge of the playbook, knowledge of the scheme, and execution and physicality that they'd be losing.
Yeah. I mean, they're just running out of guys. I mean, it's now in a deal where you almost have to bank, even if Jennings is there, you're going to have to use your rookies, Pearsall and Cowing. But without Jennings, I kind of feel like Pearsall and Cowing need to take, major roles if they're going to win this game. I mean, I mean, they weren't able to add a receiver at the deadline. It's not the deepest receiving core of all time.
No.
Yeah, I mean, you don't Debo doesn't separate against man coverage, so you got that to deal with. Then you have no Ayuk for the rest of the year. Pearsall is getting better, but also Pearsall's a rookie, and it's like hard to know exactly if Pearsall is going to, if he's going to be able to contribute. What exactly you can bank on from him.
Right.
Chris Conley's dinged up. Ronnie Bell is not much, and you got Cowing, who's he's just having a hard time kind of keeping his feet. So, man, if they lose Jennings, it might be time to pick up a street free agent. What do you think?
I'm with
or
you.
or practice squad, maybe. I don't know. They could go. They have Trent Taylor and Russell Gage and Terrell Owens' son, who's incredibly raw, Tariq Owens, on their practice squad.
Yeah, I think they trust Chris Conley. He's obviously on the downslope of his career, but he did make some big catches in the playoffs. I did watch, some of the tape. I think it was against Kansas City. He did a decent job, but he's been hobbled all year long. So he looks like, I think Shanahan said they expect him back. So that's something, but that's not like a massive amount of confidence just to have Chris Conley back. I think they need to give Cowing more of a leash, if they don't have Jennings, because I think they go with Ronnie Bell because he's been in the scheme, but he's not doing it. Like, if you're going to have another young guy out there, the next guy up to me is Cowing. You were on him, I think, from the start. I think he's just a guy that, even if you keep it simple for him, simple route patterns, drag routes, quick outs, clear outs, seams, like I think he can run a limited route tree really, really well. I think he missed a block pretty badly, I want to say last week, and that's probably part of the reason I think they've kept him out, because he's a diminutive small receiver, and they probably don't want to trust him like that. But yeah, I think Cowing is a guy that if Jennings is out, you got to throw the ball or at least look his way a little bit more.
The other injuries, by the way, just so people know, as far as practice today, no Mooney Ward, who remains away from the team, and I know he's a major key cog to defend DK Metcalf. Mitch Wishnowsky has got a back injury. They signed another a punter to the practice squad. Kyle said he's very concerned about that. Kevin Givens has got a groin. Nick Bosa with a hip. Trent Williams has got an ankle. He didn't practice yesterday or today. Limited today were McCaffrey with the Achilles, Kittle with the hamstring, Conley with the hamstring, Feliciano with the knee, and then, as we just said, Juwan Jennings with the ankle. Let's talk about Mooney for a second. I kind of assumed that, he obviously, it was a tragic situation. The Niners want to give him a wide berth. He lost his infant daughter. I mean, it's the unthinkable. I mean, I can't even imagine, what's going through his mind and what's his life has been like. But I kind of assumed that, he would be back this week for Seattle. But here it is Thursday, and he didn't practice today, and he didn't practice yesterday. And I kind of wonder, I would probably at this point, Jake, I think maybe we'd have to assume that he's not going to play on Sunday. What do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, is especially after what he just went through, losing his daughter, not being in the building. I'm sure he's with all the game plans and stuff, but I think logically it would make sense to just, instead of trying to rush him back this week, unless he feels ready and he looks ready, he comes back tomorrow, he practices a little bit. And I was watching tape of, the last time they played Seattle, they didn't have Ward. It was with Yadam and Green and Lenoir. So they've done it against Seattle without him. And Seattle had DK in that game, and they did a really good job for the most part. So I think, I'm with you. I think it's unlikely he plays. Shanahan said I think he said he was going to get him back soon was the hope. But after what he went through and the fact that he hasn't practiced the first 2 days, I would be more surprised if he did play than he didn't. And I will say Yadam, he had a couple really rough plays at the start of the year. I think he's gotten a little bit back on track. And again, he played against Seattle last time. So if that is the scenario, I don't think it's a worst case.
They do have some numbers here. Obviously you've got Deommodore Lenoir and you've got the rookie Renardo Green, who's been spectacular. But you also have Darrell Luter, who I think is obviously struggling on special teams, but I think he could be a pretty decent corner. And then you have Isaac Yiadom and Rock Ya-Sin, and that's a luxury. I mean, and especially a veteran like Rock Ya-Sin, who's played a long time in this league, and he's not old, and yet the Niners have had him as just corner depth. He made a big play on the goal line in the game against Tampa. What a luxury, huh? To have the kind of depth where you can say, oh yeah, we've had a week 11 cornerback injury, and yet the Niners still have a guy with the credentials and the skills and the relative youth of Rock Ya-Sin. I mean, that's a nice guy to plug in there, just off your practice squad.
It is wild that they went from cornerback being one of those spots where it was just perpetually terrible, after their starters. Remember they were playing Josh Norman?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So to go to Rock Ya-Sin, who is a guy I'm pretty sure a few years ago they were thinking about trading for. They had their eye on. I think they really liked coming out of the draft, but he'd just been injured. And they stuck with him and waited until, because of those injuries, he was just available. He's a guy they've really, really liked for a while. And all of a sudden he's your fourth corner? That's an incredible luxury for a guy who really knows how to play to the position and had an ascending career, and injuries just sort of derailed it. And they did the same thing sort of where they bet on Jason Verrett and waited for him. There's corner talent out there that, if you just take a chance on and you don't necessarily need him right away, you can get it. And I think having Ya-Sin is a huge, huge luxury. When they get in situations like this, they can feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. I mean, the Niners many, many years have not had this kind of a quality depth piece at such a crucial position, because the old saying is once you're out of corners, you're out of corners. I mean, what's the key to corner play is corner play. In other words, there is no key. You got to have dudes. You got to have guys who can play man-to-man coverage, and it's an impossible skill to teach. All right, let's talk about a guy who's got great man-to-man coverage, and that's Deommodore Lenoir. He signs his deal. The Niners lock him up for 5 years. All Niner fans were thrilled. I'm sure the guy who's most thrilled is probably John Lynch, because now he doesn't have to deal with another holdout. And the contract details are out. $17.8 million APY. It ranks 12th at corner. $15.4 million fully guaranteed. That ranks 25th. He got a $13 million signing bonus. And there's even more details. If you look at some of the details that are out there, his contract only adds $1.7 million to his 2024 salary cap hit for the Niners. So the Niners are going to be able to carry over a huge chunk of the 50+ million they have under the cap right now, because it's earmarked for Brock Purdy and his contract extension a year from now. But $13 million signing bonus for Lenoir, another $6.5 million hits via an option bonus in 2025, and it allows the Niners to stretch out the cap hit a little bit more, which makes it a little bit more palatable. 26, 27, 28, and 29 are all non-guaranteed high base salary years. So 49ers have team control over Lenoir through his 30th birthday, and he's taken care of financially. He said that he burst into tears. That's what he said when he got the news that the deal was done from his agent. His salary cap hits are 4.9 this year, 5.9 next year. So low hits. 2026 it's 20.5. They'll probably renegotiate. 2027 20.9, 2028 20.9, 2029 he's got a salary cap hit of 19 million. So there's restructure opportunities in 2026, 2027, 2028. You know what I mean? So it's the Niners most likely will restructure at that point. What do you think overall of the deal? What did you think of the Niners being proactive for the first time in a while and getting this deal done well in advance of the deadline?
That was one of my first takeaways. I know they tried to get him on a lower offer. I heard it was somewhere around like 2 years, and tried to get him on a smaller deal, and he sort of waited. But I think this is smart. I think it's proactive, and when, like you said, you went through the details. It's basically 2 years locked up, and then if something goes wrong, they could cut him and save $7 million in 2026. Or more likely, he's still playing really well, and then they take some of that base salary, they guarantee some of that base salary, and they just move it on and keep him around. I think he's a guy that has become their third most important player on defense, behind Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, and he's just fundamental to what they do. He's super physical. I mean, he talks trash in a way that they don't have a lot of on their team, and I think is kind of important. That he is feisty, that he is kind of a mean dude on the field. I mean, he's had DK Metcalf's number. Kind of everybody has. DK gets thrown off his game quite a bit, way too easily for a guy that large, in my opinion. That's maybe a topic for another day. But I think Lenoir is just grown into a really important player from them. And after what he was his rookie year, where you weren't sure if it was ever going to click, I mean, it's really impressive from him, and good for him, honestly. To get the value he got, it's well deserved.
He's not very big. He's only 5'10", 205 pounds or so, but he's enormously physical. He really loves to hit. I mean, he's very physical. You saw that big hit on Swift. It's interesting to me. It interests me that the NFL is such a crapshoot. I mean, the Niners took another corner in that same draft, Ambry Thomas. They took him 2 rounds earlier, and here we are, a couple years later, and 3-4 years later, and Ambry is still, he's a free agent at the end of the year. He still has not established himself. He's got talent, but it hasn't happened. He was the third round pick, but now the 5th round pick's outperforming him. And it just kind of goes to show in the NFL. It's like you get these little windows to produce. And if you produce, you're in one track. And now Demo's in that track where he's a foundation piece. He's got big money, generational wealth. He can take care of his family and multiple generations. Where Ambry, same position, very similar talent, maybe even a little bit better speed, a little bit better size, but he has not had the same consistency. And he's a free agent at the end of the year, and he's not going to get anywhere close to what Lenoir just got. And yet, on draft day, the Niners thought Ambry was the better player.
Yeah, it's really funny because they wanted, most of the time when you ask draft questions of John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan or whatever, they're pretty mum, and they might mention a few other guys they liked. One guy they mentioned that they wanted ahead of Ambry Thomas was Paulson Adebo out of Stanford, who turned into a player for the Saints. And so that's the other part of the crapshoot is you might have a guy taken and you're like, oh, well, we have this guy slightly, ranked lower, as they did with Ambry Thomas. And it turns out they should have had him ranked a lot lower. I mean, it's just, you're right. And I think a lot of it goes into scheme and coaching. And you might have a guy who's crazy talented. I forget who it was. The guy that Hassan Reddick, it took him forever to figure it out. Arizona had him playing as like an outside linebacker, and then, moved him to a proper edge rusher, and then he sort of figured it out and made himself some money, and then lost himself some money. But he turned into a player, and it took him I feel like 4 or 5 years to figure that out. And it's just like coaching, scheme, and you got to get lucky and get in the right system. I mean, look who they're playing this week, Geno Smith. How long did it take him to figure it out and get with the right coaching staff and just hang around in this league, until he got in the right situation?
It's funny too. You just never know. I mean, it's a little bit of a hit and miss situation. I think I saw, was it the 49ers wanted a different, I'm looking in the draft, in the 2017 draft, but I'm pretty sure the 49ers wanted a different tight end in that draft, and the tight end was gone. And so they wound up taking Kittle.
Right.
And I forget who it was. Let's see. Let me see who the tight ends were in that draft. Okay, so it was Evan Engram, OJ Howard. Those guys went early, first round. David Njoku went first round. See if I can find another tight end here. Oh, it was Gerald Everett. That was it. Supposedly the Niners wanted Gerald Everett, and he went 44 overall to the Rams. So that their pick was their next pick. What is the 49? Was 66, and they wound up taking Akello Witherspoon, and they took. Get this. How about this for a nightmare pick? The Niners took Akello Witherspoon, 66th overall, third round. Guess who went next? Alvin Kamara. Guess who went two picks later? Cooper Kupp. They took Akello Witherspoon, one pick in front of Alvin Kamara, and 3 picks in front of Cooper Kupp. I mean, that is brutal.
It's tough to be a corner who can't track the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, Keller Witherspoon was not good. And there were other good players in that round as well. Chris Godwin was a third-round pick. Kareem Hunt was a third-round pick. Shaq Griffin, Kenny Galladay, remember him? Trey Hendrickson, James Conner. These guys were all third-round picks. And the Niners took a Keller Witherspoon. They really swung and missed badly in that draft. Oh, my goodness. But yeah, it goes to show, sometimes you think, hey, we want Gerald Everett. Oh, somebody took him. Oh, okay, well, we won't take a tight end. We'll get one later. Oh, we got George Kittle later. It's like, it's a little bit of, it's a crapshoot. People picking people is a flawed process by nature, for sure. I'm sure the Niners are pretty happy they got George Kittle. Let me ask you one Kittle question before we go to our better lineup. What do you think of oh, wait, what a second. Did I just see a David Lombardi in there? Did we have a David Lombardi in our, I thought I saw did you see that?
There, yeah, he was asking something.
Kev,
I don't know what he was referring to.
I don't know. Let me see. Where are you getting this information from? I'm getting it from Dave's Twitter. Thank you, Dave. I was getting it from sorry, Dave. I was getting it at first. I was getting it from somebody else's Twitter, and then I went and got it off Dave's Twitter. So, Dave, thank you very much. You're right. I should cite my sources. I'm reading these contract details off David Lombardi's Twitter, which is Lombardi himself, at Lombardi himself. So thank you, Dave. Thank you for pointing that out. I should do a better job of my bibliography. There you go.
I was checking out over the caps.
Well, at first I wasn't on Dave's. I was on somebody else's. I think it was Wagner. I think I mentioned Wagner, and then it looked like I clicked on one, and I thought it was Wagner, and it was Lombardi. And then all of a sudden, then I'm like, oh, those are good details. So Dave, you're right. Cite my sources. I should cite my sources. Dave Lombardi had that, and Dave's got a lot of those nuggets. Oftentimes, Dave's got some incredible stuff when it comes to details of 49er contracts and that kind of thing. I think Dave's just all over, probably the best of anybody in the Niner content community. So let's cite our sources correctly. Dave Lombardi put that out on Twitter, and I'm not sure where Dave got it, but there's some great stuff there. So if you don't follow Dave, go follow him. I wanted to ask you though about Kittle, because Kittle is interesting. I asked him today at his locker. I said, with no Ayuk, do you need to be a bigger part of the pass game? And I don't know how you feel about it, but to me, there's just no doubt in my mind, Jake, that he does need to be a bigger part of the pass game. In fact, I'll share the screen here and let you hear this. This was, you'll laugh at this because you weren't there today, Jake. Look at this. Kittle wearing
the helmet.
He's wearing a UCLA helmet because Iowa lost to UCLA, and I think Brendel and him maybe had a wager. Here's Kittle. Here's Kittle in the locker room today.
Do you need to be a bigger part of the pass game the rest of the way because there is no Ayuk?
Do I need to be?
Yeah.
Whatever my team needs me to be, man. If I need 10 targets a game, if I need 2 targets a game, whatever it is, as long as I play the best of my ability, I know I'm helping the team win.
Yeah, so that's a good answer. But I'll ask you, Jake, because I actually think he does need to be a big part of the passing game, and I would almost like to see him be a part of the passing game, and less a part of the inline blocking. I mean, I love
Right.
Kittle's ability to block, but I got to think that they might be able to find, either Sauerbert or somebody else off the street. I mean, heck, Harbaugh's using Scott Matlock, who is a former Boise State defensive tackle,
Yeah.
as his fullback, H-back inline tight end. So you can find guys who can block. You can't find guys who can catch the ball like Kittle. I'd like to see them find another blocker and use Kittle in the pattern and put him out in the pattern a little bit more as one of the 5 eligibles. I think they need to do it without Ayuk, and especially if JJ is going to be hurt, they really need to do it.
Yeah, I think I love that it's the second time this year he's had to wear a helmet and none of them fit him. Like he's constantly having
super small helmet.
like he's constantly having to adjust the chin strap and just is speaking into it. Love that, first of all. And yeah, I think part of the problem is Dieter and I have talked about it a lot, is the protections. And the Niners are getting their protections either wrong or just not, they're getting a blitz that's good against their look. And so sometimes they have to bring Kittle into the protection. And I think they have put him in the pass game quite a bit. And I think they've used Saubert a little bit so that Kittle can get out. But I think there are some times where they're like, we're going to get pressure. And if Purdy's going to get this throw off, and now with McCaffrey back, we're going to trust that McCaffrey is going to be open as the hot, and that we need Kittle in to block. But from my perspective, I think if you're going to operate an offense that is like sort of focused on, going hot rather than max protect, you should have Kittle as one of those options. I do think he's been involved in the pass game a lot in those situations, but in terms of if Jennings is out, I think you're right. Like you do have to find a way, whether it's going, and they sort of did that a little bit against Seattle last time. I think they were a little more simple. They went to a lot of stretch zone stuff, play action. And when you do run stretch zone and boot action off of it, I think that gives you a chance to put 2 tight ends in the game. And Kittle off of play action is, I think that's one of the best ways you can use him. How many times he's decimated defenses by leaking out in a variety of different ways. So I think this is a game, especially with the way they ran against Seattle last time. I think you can use Kittle a lot more, especially if you bring in Saubert, and whether it's deception or you are just, committing to the run, I think you can get him involved through the pass game in a sort of traditional way where it's, boot action off of it, and then it opens up the offense a little bit more. But I'm with you. I do think he needs to be regularly involved as a receiver. He's just too good and too dynamic, especially against man coverage, where he's going to get up against a safety.
I mean, in the red zone, it's a no-brainer, especially, watching him. And there's this, during special teams practice, he doesn't like to waste time. So Fleury, I guess, suggested to him, hey, during special teams practice, let's just, I'll drape myself all over you and and just and we'll have a ball boy throw you a ball and just, let's work on that for 10 minutes. Let's not give the 10 minutes away and just do nothing. Let's be productive. And man, I mean, between the New England catch in the back of the end zone, this one, the toe tapper this week against Tampa, he literally has taken these 10 minutes of practice time and maximized it to the point where you're seeing the impact of those practice reps in huge situations in the game. Huge.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a great example for any young player. Don't waste time on the practice field. Always be working, do something to get better, because you never know when you're going to need those reps. And that's what he's done.
I think one of his most underrated assets is the way he just deadens his feet. Like when he is a toe tap situation and he's so long, he just, for a guy that's that physical to sort of have I don't want to say soft feet. There needs to be a better way to describe that. But he does just sort of deaden his feet to toe tap, and he does it incredibly well. And I think that's an undervalued part of his game. And you're right. He's just been incredible. He's taken his game to another level this season. I mean, he's been the most well-rounded tight end in football, I think, for the last, 5 years. I don't think there's any question about that. And the fact that he's still doing it, and he's always fighting through something, you find out at the end of the year that he's, had some broken torn ligament or broken foot or something. He's always playing through something under the radar. And to keep doing that week in and week out, regardless of what he's going through, is really impressive.
I asked a receiver. I can remember when I was in the Canadian League. I asked one of our receivers, "What is the key to the toe? The catching and getting both feet in?" And the receiver who I was asking told me, the guys who make a mistake are thinking 100% about their hands at the catch point, and after they catch the ball, they think about their feet. If you're going to do it right, you have to think about your feet as you're catching the ball. And that's really what George did there. He was worried. He had thought about his feet, his footwork, because when he caught that ball in the corner of the end zone, as soon as the ball hit his hands, both feet were in.
Yep.
It wasn't like, oh, I caught it, I got to get both feet in. It's like, I'm getting my feet in and I'm getting ready to extend for the ball, and then I catch it and my feet are in. It's he did it the opposite way.
Yeah, I've been playing tennis with my girlfriend, and every Tuesday or whatever, and I hadn't played in a while. And what you forget is like 95% of tennis is just running and positioning and getting your body in the right place. And if you're not moving and you're not thinking about your feet and where you're positioning, like you get jammed and you get put in really awkward spots. Yeah, I think in any sport, but especially in that situation, you got to be thinking exactly where your feet are going to land and just tap those toes, baby.
Yep, tap those toes, and he is so good at it. All right, it's time for our better lineup of the week for Week 11. This live stream sponsored by Betr, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Betr to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. We've done it 4 times. We've won real money 4 times. So download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get that first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does is automatically entered into a drawing to win the signed Fred Warner jersey in red. We'll announce the winner at the end of November. It's a red Niner jersey with that's autographed on the number, and it's size XL. So there you go. All right, let's go to our better lineup and take a look at Niners Hawks and what it looks like. We can pick anybody here. Let's go to Purdy. Let's start with Purdy. Let's see what the projections are for Brock. Okay, here's one that I like right off the shoot. I like the over 18.5 fantasy points. Why? Because 5 of the last 6 quarterbacks to face Seattle have thrown for 250 plus yards and 2 touchdowns or more. During this stretch, Seattle is ranked 29th in pass defense. They're allowing 8.4 yards per attempt. Purdy is QB5 this week. So 18.5 fantasy points. What do you think? Is that? I guess it kind of depends how your fantasy is graded out.
Yeah, if they're giving it where I know that's the tricky thing about these is like I'm in like so many fantasy leagues where you're trying to guess what the points are. But if it's 6 for a touchdown and what is it, 0.4 for yards? So you need 200 yards, 210 yards or something, and a couple touchdowns.
I like it. I say more than 18.5 fantasy. I like that. I like that one for sure. Let's go to CM. What's that?
I think that's solid for Purdy. I think this is going to be a big game for him in the offense.
Let's go to CMC. Let's see what Christian's projections are. There are 8 of them. 20.5 fantasy points. I don't know if he doesn't get in the end zone. That's dicey. 80.5 rushing yards. 118 rushing yards. If you want to go with that one, bet a little bit more. You can go 114.5 rushing and receiving, 30.5 receiving, 18.5 longest rush, 13.5 longest catch, 5.5 for targets. I'll say this. I like the receiving yards. I was going to say
I like the receiving yards a lot more than I like the rushing. Like I'm tempted to take the under on rushing. And the receiving yards can be a little bit of a trap because he could have 6 or 7 and it's and they're all 5 yards, but he's going to have, I would guess, at least 5 catches in this game.
I like 45 to 55 receiving yards and 35 to 45 rushing yards. That's probably
Yeah, I would feel most confident. And it's like he could break one, with the rushing yards, and that would push it over. But I kind of like the under
on the
on the
rushing
rushing
yards.
yards.
Yeah, that's a little dicey. Let's go more than 30.5 receiving yards. We'll choose that one. Now we got to go to a Seahawk because we're going to go 2 Niners, 1 Seahawk. So we got Purdy more than 18.5 fantasy points and McCaffrey more than 30.5 receiving yards. All right, let's take a look at Seattle's side of this equation, and we'll do one from the Seahawks and see what they. It says players on the same team cannot be played in this stat combo. So we can't do that. So let's get rid of the 18.5 Purdy. Let's get rid of Purdy. We'll keep McCaffrey. We'll get rid of Purdy. That's interesting. Okay, so you can't have. Let's go to Kittle. Let's take a look at Kittle.
Yeah, let's see.
So 12.5 fantasy points, not tons. 4.5 receptions, that's not tons. He had 4 targets last week and 3 receptions. And I think that number goes up this week.
4 targets, 3 receptions. That one's like, if Jennings is out, you hammer the over on receptions and targets. But if Jennings in, I still think like Kittle loves a Seattle game.
Which
That's
one do
a
you
tricky
like?
line. That's a really good line with 4.5.
Do you like the receptions more or the targets more? Do you like the 6.5 targets? So he has to be targeted 7 times. That only means
like
he has to be
receptions
targeted 3 more times than he was targeted this week against Tampa.
Yeah, I mean the smart money, I guess, on the targets, but I think he's gonna he catches the ball that's thrown at him. Like I think if he gets 6 throws, he's catching 5 of them.
All right, let's go with more than 4.5 receptions. I like that. I think that
line.
might be. I think that I like that one a little bit more, just slightly. All right, let's look at Kenneth Walker because Walker's interesting. Now the one I like on Walker, the Niners allow the 6th most receiving yards to opposing running backs.
Oh yeah, Give me the over on his receiving yards.
Yeah,
because one thing Seattle defaults to. I was just watching their tape, and one of their favorite plays in the entire world is an angle screen where the running back releases, snaps it like a Texas route, and then you've got 3 blockers out in front. They run that like 4 or 5 times a game sometimes. And Walker's a guy that you want to get out in space, and their running game is terrible. And a little screens passing is an extension of that. That's the first one. I'm like, give me the receiving yards on Kenneth Walker.
I like that too. Give me 25 or more receiving yards on Walker. So there you go. That's our 3. We'll go McCaffrey, 30.5 receiving yards more. Kittle, 4.5 receptions more. And Kenneth Walker, 24.5 receiving yards. We're going to say more. So there you go. And let's go. Why don't we bet 10 on it? And let's see what it looks like. What are we getting off our 10 to? Oh, so we have 3 picks. We can win $50. We got 5 to 1. 5 to 1 on that. It's not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah,
I do feel a little thick about going all overs, but
I know because the smart money typically is under because everybody wants to. More people bet overs than unders typically, but we're like most people. Anyway, what can we say? This live stream is sponsored by betr, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Crew Show. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners, and you'll get your first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does is automatically entered to win a free signed Fred Warner jersey, and we'll announce the winner at the end of the month of November. So a few weeks from now, we'll get that out. And good luck to everybody. Good luck to everybody. Hopefully, you guys win. I'm rooting for each and every one of you individually. Okay. Couple other things I want to get to, and one of them I want to share the screen. This is kind of an interesting one. This is Geno Smith today, saying how this game's personal. It's very personal for him. Let's play this and then we'll react. Here's Geno, and our good friend Raj reposted this. Here we go. Let's rewind it. Here's Geno Smith at the presser today in Seattle.
How important is it to you personally, Geno, to beat the 49ers?
Yeah, it's very personal, man. I think when you think about division, opponents, these games matter the most, especially with, the 49ers. They've been at the top of our division, one of the best teams in the league for a while. And if we want to be that type of team that we say we are, we got to go through teams like this. And, I have no doubt in my mind the type of guys that we have, the type of preparation we're going to put in, and really the way that we're going to step on that field. I know that I'm going to step on it with that chip on my shoulder, that edge that I always have, and I know my guys are as well.
How much for that on your resume that you haven't beaten them yet? How much is that something you need to fix?
There's teams that haven't beaten us yet. Yeah. So,
He's good for the most yards against the 49ers of any quarterback this year, more than Mahomes, more than Stafford. Talk about what worked for you guys in that first game.
Man, we lost. That's all that matters. Yards and stats and all the things that people love to talk about don't really matter to me. I just want to win.
Not the best interview of all time. I mean, that was a weird answer. I mean, that's almost like, have you been to the border? I haven't been to Europe. Okay. Have you beat the 49ers? And there's teams that haven't beaten us. Okay. And how does that relate in any way? The reality is that Geno is 0-5 against the 49ers. So it should be personal. If it ain't personal, I got to wonder about how competitive he is. If somebody beat me 5 times, I'd sure remember it.
Yeah. First of all, I love just when someone says talk about something, it's like you got to ask a question. You have to ask a question.
That's so
one of my favorite things about Debo, and Debo's a hard interview. But like when you don't ask a question, you just say something. He's like, "What's your question?" And he holds people accountable with that. And it's one of my favorite things, because you need to literally ask a question. Don't just tell them to talk about something. But
it is so lazy. You guys won the game. Talk about it.
Right. Like talk about something. Like it's just lazy.
It is
with
so
Geno,
lazy.
I kind of get where he's coming from. Like he's like, yeah, of course I want to beat him. Like I'm sick of losing to them, Like I think he's coming from that place. And he's got to be
dodge, isn't that a dodge? Hey, you haven't beat the Niners. And there's teams that haven't beaten us.
Yeah, it's not.
What does that even mean?
It's not the best, but I'm sure he's just been asked so much about it that he's probably at a tipping point with it. But yeah, that's not exactly like a confidence inspiring answer. And it doesn't really have anything to do with it. But yeah,
Other than that, it's an awesome answer.
Right. And it does feel like that luster where it was always like, all right, 49ers are going to split with the Seahawks every year because they've got that, weird Pete Carroll magic, and it's just so tough going up there. It feels like Seattle's losing that a little bit with the Niners, like that fear that you used to have where, oh God, it's Seattle. They're losing that luster. And I think it is really massively important for Seattle to reestablish that, okay, this is actually every year it's a difficult division game instead of just getting owned. And that's like, there's a mental aspect of that I think is significant.
Pretty good one there. Ian Sharp says, Geno trying to convince himself. So he didn't answer the question, but guess what? He wasn't the only person who didn't really answer questions today. The 49ers defensive coordinator didn't really answer this question either. This was a question I asked. And basically, what the genesis of this question is just that I'm looking at the numbers. Nick Bosa, okay, and this was I was doing a stream earlier with Grant, and he was like looking up these numbers. These are the percentage of snaps that Nick Bosa has played in his career, okay? 2019, he played 76% of the snaps. 2020, he was hurt, so that didn't count. But 2021, he played 78% of the snaps. Niners defensive snaps. 2022, 74%. Last year, 75%. This year, he's playing 86%. Okay, quite a bit higher than he ever has in his career. So with that as the backdrop, I looked up some of these stats. Bosa's got 59 career sacks. in 77 games. He's third on the Niners all time behind BY and Haley. But he is playing 86% of the snaps this year. Over the last 4 years, he's averaged 76% of the snaps. He's played for the year 478 total snaps. He played last year 821 snaps, and he played 75%, as I said, of the snaps. This year, he's already got 478, and we're going into week 11. Leonard Floyd has played 353 snaps, which is 63%. Last year, he played 54% of the snaps, 577 for the year. So both these guys are on a pace to play quite a bit more this year than they played last year. Why? It's because they don't have Drake. They don't Robert Beal is not very dependable. They don't have very good backups. And so they're forcing these guys to play more, and they're getting very little production out of both. They're not, it's really negatively affected Bosa. It's negatively affected Floyd. Bosa told us that he wasn't 100% in this last game when we were asking him about that embarrassing Baker Mayfield non-sack tap dance, whatever the hell you want to call it. So, he's like, well, I wasn't right there, or I could either suggesting that he was hurt and playing hurt, or that he was tired and playing tired. But either way, he's playing too many snaps. And here's the question I asked Sorensen. Listen to the question and listen to the answer, and you tell me if he answered the question.
Bosa and Floyd are playing a lot of snaps. 86% for Bosa. It's as far and away as career high. What's the plan to make sure those guys get to January? Is Matos coming back? Are you looking at free agents? How do you help those guys?
We try to, but we want to win the game. And I think it's something Bosa, he's willing to do. And obviously you want to protect him, but there were a couple of games early on we didn't have as many snaps either. So you can talk percentage, but it's also depending on the game. I think that happened early in the year at a high percentage, but some of those games we were in the 50s. So it really depends on the game situation.
Did he answer that question or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't their DCs are never gonna talk about free agents or what the plan is. I feel like they've always had bristly sort of DCs since Saleh left, or none of them really answer our questions, which has been sort of annoying.
What would you say his answer was there? I mean, his answer kind of seemed like it was like, well,
his answer
we want to rest him, but we want to win the game.
His answer is that they don't have enough depth. That's the truth. The truth is we can't take Bosa out because what do you want us to put Robert Beal out there? And I think their plan fundamentally at the start was like, all right, we're going to have Gross Matos in on first and second downs. Floyd is mostly going to be a pass rusher for us on third downs. And we'll rotate in Beal and maybe this Okuanu guy will turn into something. And he actually has, but they don't have enough. They simply don't have enough. And until Gross Matos comes back, I don't think that's going to change. And if Bosa misses this week, I don't know how you develop any sort of consistent pressure, because Floyd's not doing it. He's not doing it at all. Okuanu, I like a lot, but he hasn't won a ton from three technique. I think he's a really solid, well-rounded player, but it's not like he's getting home every time. And then Beal, sometimes he has an occasional good rep, but I don't notice him all that much. And that's it.
If you had to bet everything you owned on Nick Bosa making it to the end of the season or being hurt before the end of the season, what would you wager on?
Are you saying miss a game or miss the playoffs?
I'm saying be out for the year before the Niners are done playing.
I would say he will not be out for the year.
Okay.
If I had to bet everything I own, I'd say he won't be out. He won't, miss the end of the year for a season-ending injury, but I wouldn't be surprised if he missed a game or two. It's about to be a grueler, and he's, coming off a bye basically, and he's dealing with a hip pointer, or that's what they've called it.
Yeah.
It's not encouraging, and you're right. They just can't take him out of the game because they can't get pressure any other way because they don't have Javon Hargrave, and they're already asking too much of Malik Collins. I mean, their defensive line, I think they fundamentally should have gotten a better run defender on the interior. And like Jordan Elliott is a big guy. I think he could have been a better pass rush option. And they're using him as a run stopper, and he just gets moved out of the way on every run. And so they don't have a lot. With Givens out, their depth, it was something we talked about at the start of this year. They just don't have the guys. They just don't have enough of the guys there. And I think that is going to wear on them. I don't think it'll result in, Bosa missing the year, but I do think you're right. You keep him out for 86% of the snaps and he's already hurting. You see it in games. He's getting tired because he's asked to fire off the ball every snap, and he just doesn't have it by the end of the game every time.
It's such a catch-22. It's like, oh, hey, you're playing Nick Bosa, and you're playing Nick Bosa at a level that he's not going to make it to the finish line. What's your answer to that? Well, we want to win the games. Okay, so you win. Let's say you overplay him and you win the next couple of games, and now he's seriously hurt, and now he's out because he's played too much, and now you don't have him at all. And what then? And it's like that's the question. It's like you don't have very good defensive end depth. What are you going to do to get better defensive end depth? And the answer was, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to keep abusing our star players and asking them to play far more snaps than they can. And then they're going to go down, and then we're going to be fucked. I mean, that's basically it. That was basically his answer, because he didn't really have an answer. I mean, it's kind of a weird. It's kind of a weird. I mean, it would be more. I don't know. A better answer would have been like, hey, it is kind of a catch-22. We don't want him to get hurt, but at the same time, we need him to win the games. If we don't win the games, we're not going to the playoffs. Right. But if we play him 80% of the snaps, we are going to the playoffs, and he's not going to be there for those playoffs.
It's kind of the same thing with McCaffrey, right? And but they're not riding McCaffrey hard. I asked Kyle about that on our conference call. He's like, he disagreed that they were riding him hard, and sure, they didn't ride him as hard as they normally do, but like he still wanted him out there for every single snap coming off an Achilles after saying they wanted to sort of protect him at the start of the year. And I was just, they ride with their star players, and if the wheels fall off, the wheels fall off. It's a little bit Tom Thibodeau-esque, as I'll say as a Knicks fan, where you just, you put it all out there, and the NFL is a shorter season, and it's tougher to get through. But it's like Tom Thibodeau. He'll have these sick regular season teams, and then everyone gets hurt in the playoffs because he's playing these guys 40-something minutes a game. And I don't know that the Niners are necessarily to that point, but they really do ride their star players. And part of that is just a lack of depth at certain positions. I would argue running back, they have a little bit of depth there, and they could take some off McCaffrey. But yeah, with Bosa, they're like, well, if he dies, he dies, because we don't have anyone else.
Right. I mean, so what's going to happen if they, it's like there's a reason the Warriors are not playing. There's a reason they're a lot deeper this year, because they know Steph Curry's 36, and they know that if they play him 45 minutes a night, he'll never see the light of day in the month of May, let alone June when the finals are contested. So they've got this plan to try to nurse him through the season. And you would think the 49ers would have that same kind of plan with their star players like Bosa and McCaffrey, but Shanahan's addicted to McCaffrey and Sorensen's addicted to Bosa, and that's just the way it is. And it's like once those guys go down, it's over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame him for the most part, but I do think because really with Bosa you don't have many other options. With McCaffrey, I think you do, but like. That just goes back to how they set up the roster. They spent a little bit of money on Yetur Gross-Matos, and more than a little bit of money on Yetur Gross-Matos and Leonard Floyd, and that was their depth. And they had Javon Hargrave, and Javon Hargrave went down, and they spent a bunch of money on him, probably ill-advised a couple off seasons ago. And so some of these guys that would have helped haven't been around. And now it's all, on Bosa every single snap, and they don't really have an alternative, and they didn't buy one at the trade deadline.
Right. I mean, this is why I got real negative the day after the trade deadline, because the Niners had clear needs. They're inside their Super Bowl window. They're $54 million under the cap, and they didn't really get any help. I mean, they got Khalil Davis, I mean, all these other contenders added real players, and the 49ers needed real players at wide receiver, at defensive end, possibly at defensive tackle, and they got kind of a stopgap defensive tackle, no defensive end, no wide receiver, no running. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm not. And some people would spin it like, well, they really believed in their team, and I would counter with, or they really didn't. Right? They didn't add to their team very much at the trade deadline. They either really think that they're awesome, which is probably delusional considering the fact that they're close to 500 and Detroit looks way better than them. Kansas City looks way better than them. But they either think they're really, really good, or they don't think they're very good, and they didn't want to take invest in this, throw any draft capital at this year at all. So what's your guess, Jake? Is your guess that they think they're really good, or they think they're really not that good?
My guess is that they were 4-4 and said, we feel 4-4. We don't know exactly what we are, and our entire season rests on Christian McCaffrey. They did have a stockpile of picks. They got a bunch of comp picks coming up. They've got picks in rounds 1 through 7. I think they have 2/3, probably 2/4, I think 3/7. So they had options if they wanted to swing. I don't necessarily blame them for not swinging. And clearly the Khalil Davis move was they called around, and then at the last second went, okay, let's get literally anyone. They got it in right under the wire for a future 7th. So that was like, we need some sort of depth piece, but we don't feel great about it. I think it's something where they're like, well, if McCaffrey doesn't come back and he's not incredible, none of this matters anyway. And so they're treating that as the acquisition that matters. I think at wide receiver, unless you're going to get Kendrick Bourne to get like a wide receiver 4, I don't think it made a ton of sense to try and make a move there, especially with Pearsall ascending. Defensive end, I think they're betting on Gross Matos coming back, and they spent that money in the offseason, so that's how they were looking at it. Linebacker's a tough position to try and trade for. I would have loved like Jamie and Sherwood or someone from the Jets, but they probably want to keep him.
Yeah.
I would have preferred they got like at least a run stopper like Jeremiah Ledbetter from the Titans. I've been talking about this random defensive tackle no one's ever heard of. But yeah, they didn't. You must have been saying that to Dieter, because that your Jeremiah Ledbetter has led Dieter to throwing a Jeremiah Ledbetter, and that's a lot of Jeremiah Ledbetter. Yeah, listen, man, I'm telling you, I thought they needed a gap plug-in, just pure run stuffer, and that is all that man does. He handles double teams, and he's on a bad team, and he's on an expiring contract, and he's not like a young prospect. So I thought it made sense. Maybe they checked it out, maybe they didn't. But yeah, I get them not making a massive move, because if McCaffrey didn't come back and sort of figure out the offense, none of this thing really matters anyway. So. And the way their draft class went, where they hit on almost every pick, it looks like they're like, we got to keep doubling down and build up our reserves with more draft picks.
Yeah, keep your picks, I guess. If you can make something of your picks, keep your picks. Okay, a couple last ones before we bolt for the door. Special teams. It's a train wreck. I was talking to some people in Seattle this week. They're like, hey, Schneider was good here. And I said, well, what the heck? What's going on? Why was he good there? But it's, the special teams down here are ass. And there's only been 2 games that all season where the special teams hasn't gagged on themselves. I'm like, unless Schneider was unless he's like, he must be the world's greatest guy, because otherwise he would have been freaking fired by now, you would think. But they made a couple points. One was that in Seattle, he used starters on special teams. Guys like Brandon Browner and some of these guys played special teams. And maybe that's what the Niners need to do, is play a few more of their starters on special teams. They kind of started doing it last week a little bit with Debo as a return guy, but maybe they ought to use Fred Warner and some of these guys on special teams. If you got all these great players, maybe if you're so bad on special teams that it's killing you and beating you every week, how about use your starters? That's one. The other idea that I have, Kyle Shanahan has said and I don't know that if I'm the special teams coach, I don't think I would like this at all. In fact, if I was a special teams coach and he said this, I'd be like, we need to have a meeting. He came out and told the media, I don't want to win games on special teams. I just don't want to lose them on special teams.
That's his whole philosophy.
Well, if you're the special teams coach, how's that make you feel? It's like you don't even care if we win on special teams. You just don't want to lose. That's the most defeatist thinking I think I've ever heard in my entire life.
Listen,
but here's my point is that if you are going to say that, I don't want to win the game on special teams. I just don't want to lose it. And you have Trent Taylor, who's like the most sure-handed return guy. How do you say that and then use Jacob Cowing, a rookie who's muffed punts, who's fallen down 4 times, who looks like he's going to fumble every time he has it? Why are you using Cowing as a punt returner just because he's a little explosive and taking all those risks when you have Trent Taylor, who's one of the most sure-handed return guys in the league, and he's just walking around your locker room?
Yeah, I would say one with that, Taylor's on the practice squad, and do you really want to bump him up every game? And I honestly think, I don't think Cowing's been that bad. He does seem like he's going to trip over his own feet every time he catches it, and that's a problem. The one that was Luter's fault on that one, but yeah,
but he had a muff too. He had the muff. I forget, was that Minnesota?
Yeah, I think you're. Yeah, I can't remember, but I think that sounds right. But I think Dieter and I talked about it this week. Like Kyle's one of his most glaring blind spots is special teams. And like Belichick and Andy Reid and Mike Tomlin, some of the greatest coaches in modern NFL history, have put a premium emphasis on special teams. And Kyle, his whole philosophy is to avoid mistakes there. And yet he also counts on special teams as sort of a default when they're driving downfield and it's any sort of 4th and short. He's like, all right, well, it's a 50-something yard field goal. I'm going to trust that this is good regardless, instead of trusting the offense that he fundamentally has built. And it's this weird thing of like, he doesn't really like special teams, but he expects it to work. But it's not something I feel like he puts a ton of time in. And I'm sure he would disagree with that. But I think compared to some of the great coaches who have spent a lot of time on special teams, I don't think it's something he values. And his answers have historically, I think, supported that. So I think that's a major problem. And I think the core of the problem is dudes, right? Like, because you don't have great depth with your like 6th or 7th, your 6th linebacker and your backup DBs, you just are getting lower production. And because you're not playing like these guys that are your starters, that are the real talent, I think it suffers a lot. And that's the number one thing that I think dictates special teams. And I wouldn't put Fred Warner out there. And I think you probably can't put like Malik Mustafa out there in the same way you would have if he didn't come into his own. But yeah, I don't know if there's a solve for that when you just don't have the dudes on special teams. But if it continues, it's going to bite them.
What about Lowe the Truth? He says put Pearsall back there.
I would say Pearsall has looked far less sure-handed on punt returns. What I've seen from him in practice.
Job.
It's a really tough job. And honestly, I watched Cowing in training camp and practices, and he's looked really, really sure-handed. And listen, he hasn't been the best returner. He had the 30-yarder, I think it was last week. I'm not saying he's the greatest, but I wouldn't switch it up with Pearsall. I think Pearsall's enough on his shoulders as a receiver, and you don't want him having to worry about that and taking a shot as a punt returner when I think he's looked less sure-handed than Cowing has.
A couple rookies who are playing amazing outside of Mooney and Pearsall are Malik Mustafa and Renardo Green. My son put this out, and ML Football kind of copied it. Looks like they kind of copied his. I wonder if they cited their source. We'll have to check. But ML Football says budding superstar 49er rookie DB Malik Mustafa has been special this season. Best catch rate in the NFL, 44.9%. Best catch rate over in the NFL, 44.9%. I don't know that stat. Best among all DBs as far as catch rate allowed, 16.7%. 4th best rating when targeted, 32.6. And he's probably the hardest hitting Niner DB. So that's what you're looking at with Malik Mustafa. Renardo Green has been spectacular. I don't know. Some of these Renardo Green stats are just almost like hard to believe. I mean, Malik Mustafa is a beast, and he's just amazing to watch. But then Renardo Green has also been pretty freaking incredible. Let me see if I can find this Renardo Green stat. But basically, Renardo Green, here it is. He's played 158 snaps, Jake, and he is Pro Football Focus's second highest graded cornerback in the NFL.
Yep.
And he was excellent in his first start as an outside corner. They talked about playing him inside. I talked to him at his locker a month ago. He said, I played man-to-man press corner outside on the boundary, but I can play in the slot. But he's very serious. And it's like, I've been talking to a couple of my buddies. I get some pro personnel friends around the league. And one of my pro personnel buddies called me about 10 days ago and said, dude, Renardo Green is one of the best corners. And I'm like, yeah, I start talking. I'm like, yeah, they've got Luter and they've got, they got Mooney and they've got, no. He goes, no, I'm not talking about on your team. I'm saying Renardo Green is one of the league's best corners. I'm like, really? You really feel that way? And he's like, I absolutely do. This guy doesn't take false steps. His demeanor is the best. His balance is incredible. He says this guy can mirror receivers and he sticks with them. There's no false steps. His hands are really quiet. He says he like when he puts his hands on a receiver, he doesn't seem to draw penalties. He's strong. Like he can. Last week in Tampa,
plays way above his weight.
Yeah, he had a solo tackle on Rashad White, and he threw him to the ground. I don't know if you saw that one.
Such good form. Like the best tackling form I've seen. Like Sauce Gardner was like, he can't tackle. Sauce Gardner can't tackle. And you watch Green, and he's going how like coaches coach you fundamentally. And he's just getting guys low and getting them down. Do you mind if I take a little victory lap here?
No, please do.
On Mustafa and Green. I'm just going to rewind. I know this is in poor taste to pat myself on the back, but I had Renardo Green going to the Niners in 2 of my 3 mock drafts.
Okay.
I said,
why?
Because I'll just read my blurbs. I said he was another draft favorite of mine, absolute tactician, as well prepared of a corner as there is in this draft, perhaps besides Kamari Lassiter of Georgia. And you're getting someone who should win the starting job opposite Mooney Ward. With Mustafa, I said he's maybe my second favorite safety in this class and seems criminally underrated. And then I said I was fully sold on Ricky Pearsall as an NFL player. I just loved those picks, and I thought Green, technically, his footwork, his attention to detail, his intelligence, and he has he has enough measurables to be able to match up with just about anybody. And then Mustafa's a guy who's kind of raw, but like you saw it on tape that he had the range, he had the physicality, the trigger to get downhill and just blow guys up. And for them to get both of those guys, they're suddenly a team, and lock up Demo. Suddenly they're a team that has like built from the back, with Jair Brown. He's, I don't think, been excellent this year, but there's still a little reason for optimism there.
Yeah. He's really nice. He's a really nice looking player for sure. And he it's so funny because, leading into the draft, I was getting somewhat addicted in the month of March in April last year to the mock draft simulators. Right. Because me, I mean, I go down a mock draft simulator. I mean, that's an hour and a half project right there. So I was playing around with a lot of different mock draft simulators, and almost across the board, I kept taking Renardo Green. Now, why is that? Because most of those simulators had him graded as a 4th or 5th round draft choice.
Yeah.
And the highest I saw any of them have him was like second half of the 3rd round. And to me, he was the best corner on the list after about the top of the 2nd round. So I was like, oh, I really want this player. Then when the Niners took him in the 2nd round, almost all of the draft reports were like, good draft for the 49ers, but they reached for Renardo Green because everybody had a 4th and 5th round grade on him. But, that's where it's like, hey, you know what? Don't, go find guys who can play. It doesn't really matter if you draft him in the 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round. After the top 12 or 15 picks, there's a big drop off anyway. The guys who are picked 16, 17, 18 are often more like 2nd round picks. there's not a huge difference between the guy who goes in the teens or the guy who goes in the 40s sometimes. So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? I just feel like the people get so caught up on like draft value. And it's like, forget about that. Just go find guys who can play. Now, Florida State has had a tremendous run with guys who can play. I mean, Derwin James was good there. He's great in the pros. And there are other guys.
That's what I was
Florida
going to say.
State's a factory. Yeah.
You look at what has happened to them this year in college. They lost so much talent. Those Florida State guys are absolutely killing it. You look at Verse and Fisk with the Rams.
Those two guys have been great. Verse is like
Coleman.
One of the strongest defensive ends I think I've ever seen.
He's a monster. They had Keon Coleman, Trey Benson. I mean, they just had so many guys last year, and they have not been able to recover from losing all of them. Tatum Bethune, Johnny Wilson. There's just so many guys that got drafted from their team that
who are playing well.
It's been brutal. Yeah.
Some of these guys are playing well. I even like Tatum Bethune, even though he's a step slow. But Wilson, Johnny Wilson, the big receiver, went to Philly, right? Didn't he go to Philly? Florida State's just got dudes, and they got guys on their defensive line this year that are really good. One more I want to share the screen. This was a question I asked Brock today, and I thought this was kind of interesting. I mean, to me, Brock Purdy is 4-0 when he himself doesn't turn it over. And that's this year. And he's 16-0 in his brief career with the Niners when he himself doesn't either fumble it or have an interception. I'm not saying if the Niners have no turnovers. I'm saying if Brock himself doesn't throw a pick or fumble the ball himself, the Niners are 4-0 this year and 16-0, period, over his career. I threw those stats at him today and asked him what he thought of them. Here's what he had to say.
4-0 this year when you don't fumble the ball or throw an interception. I think you're 16-0 since you've been here in those situations. When you hear those numbers, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I mean, it makes sense. If you win the turnover battle, I forgot what the stat is, but it's, it's almost an automatic win. And so for me, that's my job, and I take pride in that. In those games where you don't turn the ball over or anything like that, and you're protecting the team, you're protecting the offense, and your defense can then go out and create turnovers, and you can feed off each other. So like that's a huge part of the game, and so it makes sense. That's probably the case with a lot of teams around the league. The quarterbacks that play smart and do their job and put up points without turning the ball over, you're gonna have a really, really high chance of winning. So that's the goal every week.
What do you think, Jake? I mean, it seems almost like, yeah, of course, but 4-0 and 16-0 when you take care of the football, it almost, if I heard that stat and I was him, I'd be like, you know what? I think I might throw maybe 2 or 3 less 50-50 balls this week, knowing that stat in the back of your head. Maybe I won't, just try to put it in harm's way. Maybe one time a game, it might be better if we just punted. I don't know. What do you think when you hear him address it? And when you hear those stats, I mean, they're pretty ridiculous numbers.
Yeah. I mean, it is like, turnovers are, what is it? The number one predictor of wins and losses. But yeah, it is something where this team, I think for the most part, if they don't destroy themselves, they usually win. Now they have a number of ways they like to innovate and destroy themselves, whether it's, missed protections or false starts or other idiotic ways to lose games. But yeah, if I think that's part of the downside with Purdy is he's such a good off-schedule playmaker that sometimes he can get a little high off his own supply. And it's a little bit, I've made the comp before, it's a little bit like prime Russell Wilson, where Russ would buy time, and sometimes it wouldn't go right because he would just play out of the structure too often. And I don't think Purdy's at all like that in terms of how he looks at it. I think he's fundamentally trying to execute the offense in a way that I don't think Russ ever had a full comprehension of, and was sort of addicted to just playmaking. But there is that downside of, when he tries to buy all that time and playmake, it can result in, instead of just throwing the ball away, you get a bad interception or you try and fit a ball into a tight window. Like you go to that one Ayuk touchdown, I think it was against Jacksonville last year, where it was like, no. Yes, it's like that Kerr gif, when Curry threw up that thing where he dribbled through like the entire Clippers and then he threw it up and Kerr goes, no. And then he's like, yes. It's a little bit like that with Purdy sometimes, but he's got a lot to think about, as a quarterback. So if I'm him, I think he understands protect the ball, but I don't think you can even stress it even more than that.
Two last questions, and we're calling it quits. Give me your key to victory on Sunday. If there's one thing that you say, you know what, outside of the things we've talked about, is there one thing that stands out to you as, man, this has to happen? This is the key to victory against Seattle this week.
Yeah, I would say the obvious one, number one, is like run the ball effectively. But the more crucial one, the one that I've been sort of chewing on, is McDonald. Much like many of these really good defensive coordinators, he loves to throw blitzes that are either, simulated pressures, but he likes to bring one side, overload one side, and drop the other half into coverage. And he'll drop a nose tackle into coverage, and edge into coverage, and bring other guys. And you might only have like a 4 defensive players on 5 offensive linemen, but because of the way he brings them, you'll have 1 unblocked rusher. And that's something the 49ers have struggled with week in and week out. And I think if they're going to win this game comfortably, I think that's something that they need to handle their protections, especially in those situations on third down, much better, and have a better plan. And especially give Purdy a chance where the unblocked rusher is not coming from his blind side. Give him a chance. It might get swatted like it did last week. He had a blitzer right in his face, and it got swatted. It was Antoine Winfield. But at the very least, he's not getting hit from his blind side. I think that's the way the 49ers operate. But I think if they're better about handling their protections, I think that's a key to victory.
I'm going to say Kenneth Walker. I just think it's real clear that, especially you look at that last Ram game, and they came out, they tried to establish Walker. They gave him 25 carries. I think he only had like 80 yards on 25 carries, so he kind of struggled. But I would say it's Walker. He in week 6 against the Niners, he had a 17% target share. They threw him. He caught 8 balls that day. He's got 99 carries so far, Jake, for 398, 4 yards a pop, 6 touchdowns, which is a good number. He's also got 30 receptions for 217 yards. I'm looking at these Niners stats defensively. The Niners allow the 6th most receiving yards in the league to running backs. And to me, I think they're going to do a nice job against Walker, the runner. But Walker, the receiver, especially in the screen game, I think that, to me, he's very quick. He's built low to the ground. He's very explosive. He's hard to tackle. The screen game is all about hustle, desire, so on and so forth. To me, if they can shut down Kenneth Walker rushing and receiving and not let him, have 100 yards, receiving because he's caught 4 screen passes and had all kinds of rack yards. If they can control Kenneth Walker, in the pass game, I think the Niners win, and I think they could win by 14 or 17.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I also think you shut down Walker, you put it on DK Metcalf, who I quite honestly think might be their third best receiver. Like he's their most explosive receiver, but he's also like prone to throwing a fit every single time he plays and doing something stupid and just, not actually playing like a wide receiver. Like he's so physically talented. And also at times you're like, I wish I had anyone else out on the field. He commands attention, but like some of the stuff he does, it must be just exhausting for Seattle fans.
Last question. And somebody was like, hey, where's Dieter? And now we have Dieter's henchman. Somebody called you Dieter's henchman. Yeah, Jake and I are old friends, and we've worked together many times. And Dieter is sick, but I told Dieter a couple weeks ago, hey, I want to get Jake on. And I was hoping to get Jake on with Dieter and have like a kind of a trio, but we do appreciate Jake coming on tonight, especially since Dieter's kid made him sick.
Right.
So Dieter couldn't make it tonight. But here we go. Last question of the night. Give me one or two names of 49er players that you love to watch. Like, they don't have to be the best player on the team. They don't have to be a star player. It could be any player. Just somebody that you're like, you know what? I love watching this guy play. I've got 2 that come to mind that I really love watching play. I'm like, these are guys that, I nerd out and will watch them again and again and again and rewind. I'll let you go first, though. I don't want to,
Yeah.
you know, I'm the host. I want to serve. I want to let you get involved first. So go ahead. What do you think,
Yeah.
Jake? Who are the one or two guys on the team that you're like, man, I love watching these guys play?
I'll give you two, and they're both on defense.
Okay,
One
I've
is
got two, and they're
Mustafa.
both on defense too.
One is Mustafa.
That's one for me too. He's
'cause-
awesome.
And the other one's Fred Warner.
Okay, that's good.
Because just Warner, like being able to see the way the linebacker position has evolved from just like a thumper, and Warner, I talked to him, going into this season about his aspirations, and he's like, I want to be the best player in the NFL, which like obviously, but like he's a guy that can actually reasonably hold that mantle if he ascends. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is hard to knock off, but like Warner is in that category where it's not an insane thing to say. And the way he just fundamentally dictates the way offenses have to try and attack the 49ers and can also, get down and dirty in the run game, it's just sick. So I'd say Warner, and then Mustafa is just, he moves at a different speed with a level of I'm going to like actually murder you type energy. That's just, without Dre Greenlaw, they need it from somebody, and they're getting it from Mustafa.
Yeah, I mean, Mustafa is just like almost too good to be true. Too good to be true. I mean, smart as hell, hits like a truck. Fourth best passer rating in the entire league when targeted, 32.6. He's been really good. He's been really good. It's not, what I love about Mustafa is you can, like, there are plays where I know it's Mustafa and I don't see the number just
Right.
because of the thump and because of how fast he's coming up. You know what I mean? This guy shoots the gap. This guy fires himself towards the line of scrimmage. This guy reminds me of Ronnie, or, I mean, he's not quite the Ronnie hitter, but man, he's close. He's a thumper. He is an absolute, this guy's, and he's smart as heck. Yeah, like if you talk to him in the locker room, he's got really, really good idea of how to play coverage and how to play safety. And he's got, I mean, well coached. Incredible
who Daniel
player.
Bullock's their safeties coach? I asked him in the offseason. You know who he compared him to?
Who's that?
Bob Sanders.
Who was the Iowa kid, big, thick safety, but he can run.
As a rookie who had not set foot on the field, he compared him to Bob Sanders, former Defensive Player of the Year.
That's amazing. That's impressive. All right, so we both have Mustafa. You have Fred. I am going to share the screen, and I asked Fred, fittingly enough, about the guy that I like watching, and here was Fred answering this, and we got a little highlight above as well. So here we go. This is Fred, and I like Evan Anderson, and I asked.
Oh,
Fred
I knew it. I knew you were going.
Anderson up front, he just seems like he gets better and better every game.
Yeah, man, Evan's just doing a heck of a job, really. Like, you talk about an undrafted free agent coming in, and usually the case is that guys don't really know your name. You just kind of you show up, you go to work, and make a practice squad, and then all of a sudden your name's called to be on the active roster, and has made plays in every single game that he's been up. It's just it's a testament to him, the way that he's worked his confidence and his abilities and being ready for his moment when his number was called.
Yeah, that is my guy, man. Whoa, this kid is great. I mean, this kid, I wanted to see the Niners trade for DJ Jones or at least sniff around DJ Jones at the trade deadline. But you know what? The more I watch this kid, I'm like, they don't need DJ Jones. I mean, this is DJ Jones. This kid is DJ Jones. He's got the quickness. He's got the strength. He's got the natural anchor. I did an interview with him, and he's like, I've got a natural kind of anchor to me because of the way I'm built. And he's like, he really does. He can, when this guy anchors his feet to the ground, I mean, it's like he ain't going anywhere. You're not moving this guy. And then you can see the crazy strength. He splits the double team and throws guys away. On that highlight that we just showed, he's literally jump cutted to his right, and the center tried to pick him off and whiffed completely. And he's in the backfield. The combination of the strength, the quickness, the lower body weight and anchor. I mean, you have to be built that way. Not everybody's built that way. This is a 2-gap, strong against the run. Have you noticed that as soon as Hargrave went out and this guy started playing more snaps, their interior run D was quite a bit better?
I don't think I still think it's pretty bad, but I'm with you. I think he is like more of a true nose tackle in a way that they have not had in a while. I don't think he's the athlete DJ Jones is, but and I think he's still learning. But I do think in like a year or two, like you get a guy that just can anchor in that way, and you're right, like he's just so stout and he's got strength that like they don't really have. Like Collins kind of has it, but otherwise they don't have guys that can anchor. Like Jordan Elliott's huge. I don't see him anchor very well. I see him get moved out of gaps a lot. Anderson is just he is tough to move, and I think that's really valuable on a team that needs pretty much exactly what he is.
That's going to do it for us tonight. I do want to play this one last one just because today was a kind of an emotional day for me. Emotional day for a lot of Bay Area sports fans. Tommy Tolbert finished up his radio career. He's been a good friend. He came to KMBR in 1996. I came to KMBR in 1997. And, it's weird. We've, been around each other for so many years. We worked together for 3 years. In a lot of ways, we raised our families at the same time. It was great to go to Hawaii, with KMBR a couple years ago, and we brought our families and they had a chance to meet each other. Here's the final part of Tom's final show on KMBR. Kind of an emotional end to the show.
There have been a lot of people texting me. Mark Spears, Marcus Thompson. I love those guys, both of them. Love having them on. They're just so many guys. Like, I didn't know Marcus. I didn't know Mark before the show. I mean, I knew him, but I didn't really know him like we know him now. Like, get a chance to talk to somebody each and every week. It's just so much fun. You build that connection with everybody. And I'm hoping that came through to everyone that listened for 28 years. Like, it wasn't about, like, the hard-hitting questions. And I know I got, every once in a while, Tom, why didn't you ask him this? Why didn't you grill him? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Everybody knows me, knows I don't do that. Like, that's just not who I am. I just want to talk with somebody about sports, have a good time, and try to get some answers in my own way. I know sports, played sports at the highest level, and watched sports for 50 years, I guess. My goodness, it goes back a long time. I can't imagine how many hours of sports I've watched. I've loved sports my entire life. Like, that's kind of who I am, and that's kind of how my day revolves around sports. Like, what games on tonight? What are we going to watch? And it's not just football. It's basketball. It's baseball. It's hockey. Even soccer recently. Like, I love the competition that comes with it, and I love the people that come with it. So getting to talk to those people has just been an absolute blast. So, look, I'm not leaving sad. It's been 28 years. How many people get 28 years? Don't you do it. Don't you do it.
No,
God,
I can't do it. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
All right, go ahead. You can go.
I can go?
Say what you want to say.
I can leave or I can.
No, you can say what you want to say.
There's not much to say, man. I don't want to be all weird about it. I just, dude, they say, like, I'm from here, man. And you talk about being here 28 years. I was 6 years old or something when you started on the air. I don't remember KMBR without you. You think certain teams, you think Warriors, you think Steph Curry, you think Giants, you think Barry Bonds. When people think KMBR, man, they think Tom Tolbert. And they say don't meet your heroes. And I was really, really lucky to get to call one of mine my partner, man. And I'm never going to have another first one. And I'm really sad that you're going to be gone. I love you, bro.
Love you.
Thanks, man.
Hate you. Take it away, Dirk.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Yep. There you go. An end of an era there. And, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to get emotional here, but I just wanted to say that Tom's a hell of a guy, and I enjoyed working with him. He's a great guy, and he was a lot of fun to work with. And I just want to thank him for the years that we had a chance to work together, and wish him nothing but great health and great success. And somebody's saying, why is he leaving? He's leaving just because, radio is under siege. And the revenue's just not quite there, and times change, and the whole thing kind of needs a reset. Not KMBR or necessarily that show or anything. I just mean kind of the whole industry kind of needs a little bit of a reset. And there's guys from past eras making money that's commensurate with that era of revenue in the industry, and now the revenues have changed dramatically, largely because of podcasts and YouTube and everything else, all the different options out there. I guess the long and the short of it is I could say that I have 4 children, 23, 22, Kev's 22. I got an 18-year-old. I got a 14-year-old. And kids don't listen to the radio, for the most part. If you like music, you got Apple Music or Spotify or whatever. And if you talk, there's lots of things. I mean, what Jake and I are doing right now is the equivalent of a talk show. So, radio's under the gun. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of, they're trying to maintain everything, and it's just difficult. So it's just times change, things change. Newspapers were huge. It was the greatest deal ever. I like, my dad used to be like, Blair, newspapers are a great deal. Sure. It's a quarter, and look at everything that's in there, all the information, all the things you could read. It was very mentally stimulating for a quarter. But like my son and his era kids, they look at that as a wasted quarter. Right? Because you can get the same information online. But I don't know that you actually read it the same way online that you did when it was the actual newspaper copy.
There's like an analog. There's an analog. I mean, I got my start like with a college newspaper, covering like D3 sports, and there is like something special about putting out like a newspaper every week and being able to hold it in your hands and seeing what you messed up. And it is special. There's like a tactile quality that you miss, and the same with radio and the crackling and being in the car just alone with that. And I obviously got my start over there with those guys, so I've been through it, and it's hard. It's a hard, weird time for media, and it's tough. But I'm glad they got to end it on that moment together.
Yeah, no question. And Tom wasn't the only one. I mean, my thoughts go out to John Lund, Tony Ryan, Lamont and Tonelli, and all the people at the Bone, and all the people that wound up losing their jobs. I've been there. I know what it's like. All I would say to any of them is don't panic. Think about what you've done, where the world is right now, media wise, where you think it's going, and persevere. And I have, and I know you guys can too. So anyway, hey, I appreciate it. And Jake, thanks for giving me that over the cap breakdown on Demo's contract. Thanks to everybody who jumped in. Thanks to Jake. Sorry that Dieter is ill. Hopefully, Dieter, you get better. Jake, I'll give you the final. By the way, everyone's worst nightmare says Lund gets no love. No, Lund was on today with Greg. He had his own send off. I'll say that, I'll say this. I didn't have a send off. You don't get a send off usually. Usually you get somebody's going to walk you to the parking lot and take your card key. So what you saw today was a classy move by Mike Holler and KMBR to give John and Greg a send off. And then I think tomorrow, or John and Tom a send off. And tomorrow, I think Lamont and Tonelli will probably have a send off on the Bone. So, anyway, these are all my friends, and it's a tough time, but we wish them well, and we just want to say it was really a pleasure working with every one of them. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to everybody, and thanks to all of you guys for jumping in and enjoying the stream tonight. I'm back streaming tomorrow morning from Levi's. I'll get up bright and early, 9 a.m. with Damon Bruce tomorrow morning, 10:45 with Chase Sr. tomorrow. And then I'll be back at Niners Nightly tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And we have a writer coming on from Seattle to talk a little bit about the Niners and the Seahawks. So I'm looking forward to that. Join me tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on KMBR. And Jake, if people want to catch up with you, if people want to, catch everything that you're putting out there, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, follow us on Dieter and Hutch on YouTube. We're doing we do a post game show, we do a Tuesday breakdown, and then we do a Friday preview. So follow us there, and then you can follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky or wherever the hell everyone's going these days. I don't know, but yeah, follow Dieter and Hutch on YouTube, and got all our links there.
Thanks, Jake. You're the man. Thanks, everybody. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man